This is my presentation on understanding students with ADHD. How many students with ADHD are currently being served in the U.S.? Right now, there is approximately 11% of 4 to 17-year-old children that are diagnosed with ADHD. That is about 6.4 million children. Also, 6.1% of these children are taking ADHD medication. Why the increase of students with ADHD and the reported reasons? People diagnosed with ADHD has actually increased by 3% each year. Some of the reasons being heredity, structural differences in the brain, and environmental causes. For heredity, genes strongly contribute to ADHD. Research shows that ADHD is 2 and 8 times more likely in parents and siblings of children and the youth that have had ADHD than in typical children and their families' relatives. Structural differences in the brain also have an effect, and these structural differences are structural and functional differences in the brain in terms of shape, thickness, and volume. Some of the differences are variations in brain anatomy, variations in the brain functioning, and neurochemical factors. There are also links between brain abnormalities and the reading comprehension of students with ADHD. And the final one is environmental causes. Now, these are not as structurally sound in research as heredity and the differences in the brain, but they do still have cause some ADHD. And some of these are like prenatal factors such as smoking, lead, and alcohol. Also perinatal factors like low birth weight, and as well as postnatal causes like environmental toxins, poor diet, low family income, child abuse, and neglect, and those all play a role in ADHD. Specific behaviors and characteristics of students with ADHD. There are 3 primary characteristics, which are inattention, hyperactivity, and impulsivity. In inattention, students tune out from a task because they believe it's boring or repetitive. They can also bounce from task to task without completing any of them because it just piques their interest in another activity. They also have trouble focusing and need a calm and quiet environment to, say, do tests or work on assignments. Hyperactivity, they're always moving. Students are always moving. They're trying to do several things at once. They have difficulty relaxing, and they also talk excessively. They also have a temper or a short fuse as well. And the third one is impulsivity, and this is a problem with self-control. Students usually tend to interrupt conversations, invade people's space, and they tend to ask irrelevant questions in class, and they ask overly personal questions as well. Most of the time they act without thinking, and they also have tempers or tantrums. So those are kind of the 3 primary characteristics. Some of the difficulties that they face in school from these characteristics has to do with like participation and being able to learn. It's difficult for them to learn and participate because they need to be in a room or a place where they can focus and it's quiet. And this isn't your normal school setting because students are all in one classroom. Sometimes you're doing multiple things at once. So it's very difficult for students to focus. And if we were to put them in a room by themselves, this would disrupt their social skills and the learning environment that they really need to have while they are in a classroom. Demonstrating all the same characteristics. Not all students with ADHD demonstrate the same characteristics or degree of behavior. Some only exhibit one of the signs or one of the characteristics, while others may exhibit all of them. It just kind of depends on the student and what they are more prone to do. Maybe they just tune out when things are repetitive or boring, but they don't necessarily keep moving and have difficulty sitting still. So they could just have one of the characteristics, they could have a couple, or they could have all three. It just depends on the student and everything like that. From the idea, the category ADHD is defined under other health impairments. Effective class-wide interventions. Some of these include task duration, direct instruction, peer tutoring, structure and organization, rule reminders and visual cues, productive physical movement, distractions, pacing of work, and the token system. During task duration, the assignment should be brief and the feedback should be immediate. So this way students really can engage. And also with longer projects, they should be broken up into manageable parts. For direct instruction from the teacher rather than having just the students do activities at their seat. This way they are getting instruction directly from the teacher, and that way they are there to help them as well. It's also a way to teach them effective note-taking strategies that can help them while doing their instruction. Peer tutoring, this is also another way. It provides frequent and immediate feedback, so that the students have what they need in front of them right at that moment, even if the teacher is doing something else. And this has also been shown to have dramatic academic gains. Now, structure and organization. This one, the lessons, the important points should be clearly identified and outlined, so that way the student can tell what they are really trying to gain from this lesson. Rule reminders and visual cues. The rules have to be clearly outlined as well, and they should be frequently reinforced through visual presentation. The rules need to be reminded to students because they may tend to forget because they get distracted by other things. Productive physical movement. Now this is something because students with ADHD have difficulty sitting, so they have activities that they can move around but are still beneficial to their learning. There can also be things other than just activities that pertain to the lesson being learned. They can be done through like having breaks or having a student take a note to another teacher, trips to the office, and like watering plants around the classroom. Also altering the seat work activities can be very helpful as well. Now, along with this, there's also distractions. Now, in classrooms, there may be a class pet or plants, something like an aquarium, anything like that. Now, when seating a student, with ADHD, they should be seated away from these distractions, because if it catches their eye, they can be prone to focus on them rather than the lesson being learned. And these distractions play a big role in their learning because they get distracted and they fail to learn what the lesson is trying to teach them. Now, the pacing of work. When possible, allow the students to complete the work or the assignment at their own pace. This not only helps lessen the stress that they receive, but also just helps them kind of focus on what they really need to be focusing on without being stressed. And one of the last ones is the token system. This is like giving a student a token when their behavior is good and when they have done something appropriate, and by also taking the token away when it is not. And these tokens can be exchanged for like tangible rewards or certain privileges when the time is right. Now, there's no one or a set of these interventions that can improve the functioning of a classroom, but they can all work together and help each individual student. it's a suggested modification that can be tailored to each individual student. So each one can be changed a little bit depending on what the student's needs are. Not all of these may work in one classroom just because it depends on the students and how they work, but they can be helpful in some situations. And they can also help the students tremendously, which is the main goal of the teachers.